agree.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
They're starting if everyone can come in. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to have the Vaishnava panel now, and our first speaker is going to be Graham Flack.
Sure. Thank you. And because we don't have very much time, I don't dare express all my deepest gratitude to Rita Sharma for putting on this wonderful conference. And I don't want to take the time to thank Mira and AJ Shingle also for their generosity and also contributing to such an event. And I don't want to thank all of you for being here because I just don't have the time. Okay, good. So we've got that straight. Okay. So in The Pure Fragrance and the Earth Am I, quoting the Bhagavad Gita, intimacy with the divine through nature, Krishna Bhakti Theology. I'm going to go blank here for a little while and just see what I've got here. I put this together while I was, you're not supposed to see this. I put this together while I was in a trance, so I'm really not quite sure what's here. But let's see what we've got. So my purpose here is to explore the aspects of theology and practice of Krishna Bhakti and Caitanya Vaiṣṇava, and how its vision may have implications or even some contributions toward our contemporary challenges in promoting environmental sustainability. I'd like to locate this exercise generally in the realm of applied theology, and even within that, locating the study within the very little explored area of Krishna Bhakti ethics. And then even further within this, a look at only a sliver of meta and normative ethical aspects of Krishna Bhakti theology, as it bears upon our conference theme. Can everyone hear me back there all right? Yeah, good. So, you know, the Krishna Bhakti theology of Caitanya is a theology of love. Klaus Klostermaier once wrote, quite a while ago, he described it as a kind of hridaya vidya, a knowledge of the heart. Basically saying it's a theology of love. And he said possesses the most sophisticated, most carefully worked out vision of love for the divine. The theology of Krishna Bhakti values nature and natural phenomena as something divinely precious in an ultimate sense. And this is expanded most powerfully in the poetry of its revelational scriptural writings, and also depicted most prominently in the visual arts of the tradition. And I'm going to be utilizing some of those visual arts. The beauty of nature is inextricably tied to divine love in Krishna Bhakti. It's just that simple. There is no separating the two. In fact, it is nature that embraces divine lovers when experiencing union, samsara, and when experiencing aloneness and longing, vipramanva. The natural setting keeps divine lovers together, whether together or apart. It is Yoga Maya's stage set for Leela. It is the one dominant element within Leela that enhances the dynamics within Rasa. Nature in the divine world of the nature in the eternal world of the divine, Leela, embraces divinity. The divine is moved by nature to send out a love call in order to embrace all sentient beings, and then sentient beings perceive the love call in and through all things and return the embrace through a life of seva. So I like this idea of an embrace, a divine embrace. And of course, the definition of love commonly understood is the intensive feelings of affection for another person. But you know, here and I messed up my clock here. Okay, there we go, I got it. Okay, good. Here, I like to speak of a divine embrace and a human return embrace. And I think all of this is made possible through nature, nature as we know it in this world, but also nature that metonymically participates in a divine world. So an embrace, on the one hand, is something that connotes a kind of acceptance, a full appreciation of someone or something. And on the other hand, wants to enter more into the mystery of the other. So it's this dynamic sort of dance between one and the other. And I claim that this goes on within the divine and within humans in response to the divine. Let's see here. Yeah, so what we've got here then is, I'd like to just review quickly, again, as a meta-ethical consideration, that the embrace of Krishna is expressed in 4 divine manifestations. The Vishwarupa, the way the divine pierces through the physical world. The Brahman, which is everywhere. Purusha, which is inward. And Bhagavan, which is intimate and personal and singular. The embrace of the divine would be Bhagavan, would be known as Bhagavan. Return embrace of the devotee would be the bhakta, and the love between them, the bhajana. So what is it that embraces the one who embraces all, as Bhagavan? It is nature. Amazingly, it is nature, a manifestation of love that conquers even Krishna, the source of divine love. Now, I'd like to show unblank this. Unblank, thank you. I'm getting a little nervous there. I didn't think the machine was working. Okay, so what we've got here is really 3 things: nature in the background, in the midground, and the foreground. And these are different ways that nature embraces it. And it's so palpably obvious when you take a look at some of these. What do I have? These paintings by B.G. Sharma. And just look at the ways in which nature, this doesn't work. The way nature just engulfs the divine images of Radha and Krishna, and mirrors their coupling with birds and with vines and trees and so on. Here, I mean, it's hard to imagine these images without nature. In fact, it's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. So this is nature in the background, but even so, it's so engulfing. This projector turns everything very red. Is there a reason for that? Everything's so red. Anyway, it's not like this in the original. Or am I colorblind here? It's very red, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
We'll accept the new one, don't worry.
Okay. So we'll ignore the last comment. Anyway, so nature in the midground. Okay. So this is where, here Radha and Krishna are interacting with the rain that's coming down. And again, much more in the foreground. Nature becomes more forward. And then, of course, Krishna interacting with the cows in the fields. And then certainly the rains and the trees is protecting the cow herds, the cows, and really quite a beautiful painting depicting this. Then nature in the foreground. I mean, practically speaking, the Radha Krishna figures get lost in this engulfing, sort of embracing of nature around Radha and Krishna in the grove. Now, I don't know how well you can see this, but this is the scene that Krishna sees that moves him to playing the flute at the beginning of the Ras Lila, the Rasa Panchadhyaya chapters. And the verse is, even the beloved Lord, seeing those nights in autumn filled with blooming jasmine flowers, turned his mind toward love's delights, fully taking refuge in Yogamaya's elusive powers. And so it's this scene that he is moved to play his flute. Then the moon, king among stars, arose, spreading soothing reddish rays over the face of the eastern horizon, dispelling the sorrow from those who looked on as a lover caresses his beloved's blushed face, consoling her after long separation. Seeing lotus flowers bloom in the perfect circle of the moon, beaming like the face of Rama, reddish as fresh kumkuma, seeing the forest colored by the moon's gentle rays, he began to make sweet music, melting the hearts of fair maidens with beautiful eyes. So, the passage goes on, and so, when they hear the sweet music, young women of Vraja burst out of their homes at night and run off to the forest. Now, the issue of the Vraja Gopikas running out of their homes at night, leaving their husbands, their children, and so on, being very irresponsible, is something that's considered by the text and also by the tradition as something that moves into parodharma, something that goes beyond worldly concerns and ethics. But it's interesting because dharma is maintained also. And Yogamaya provides a stay-at-home image for each of the gopis, very conveniently, while they're out in the forest. So this is a very nice arrangement, I think. And while it's a kind of theological and aesthetic motif, it is saying that this world is important. It's not the gopis ran out and said, to hell with it. We don't need any image there. And I'm dropping technology a little bit. But it's saying that both are important. And that's why Krishna's very clever double entendres are quite cunning and very clever. Night is a frightening appearance, Krishna says. Inhabiting this place are fearsome creatures. Please return to Vraja. Women should not remain here. The Sanskrit also reads, night is without a frightening appearance. Inhabiting this place are creatures that are not fearsome. Please do not return to Vraja. Women should remain here, oh, ones with beautiful ways. Okay. So he's saying both at the same time. You can only do this in Sanskrit. You can't do this in English. Unless you do it with attitude. Like I'm not going to demonstrate any of this. But your mothers, fathers, sons, brothers, and husbands cannot find you. They are searching for you. Do not create anxiety for your families. Your mothers, fathers, sons, brothers, and husbands cannot find you. Even though they are searching for you, you must not be anxious for your family. Stick around here. First one, go back. Second one, stick around here. While this is very entertaining, it's saying that both are important, dharma and parodharma. This world is important, and the other world is important. And I could go on anyway. We don't have time. Let's see here. So, divine presence in the superlative forms of the nature of this world. I go through here and do refer to all of the I am statements that Krishna makes in the Gita, and thus the title of my presentation, Pure Fragrance in Earth and the Brilliance in Fire am I, and so on. And there are many of these, and I think many of you might be familiar with these already. So in the interest of time, I'll keep moving along. You can see there's quite a bit. And these passages need to be taken seriously. The superlatives of this world are little comparatives of the divine world. Again, affirming the importance of this world. This world is not to be rejected, according to this tradition. One who sees me everywhere and sees all things in me, to such a person, I am never lost, nor is such a person ever lost to me. Do you like that translation? Yeah, it's mine. Well, I just wanted to check out first. They didn't like it. Okay, good. So, we're going to move along here because we've got a limited amount of time. The form of a thing, a form of a thing in this world can be metonymically reflective of its fuller representation in the divine world, while the substance of that thing is changing and thus fleeting. So the forms are important, but the substance is in flux. If the temporary external body is seen by bhaktas as a temple for the divine, along with the eternal self, and if the physical world and the natural landscape within it are thus part of the external body of the divine, then we have a custodial relationship with the outer world as well as the inner world. So to wind this up a little bit, Achintya Vaiṣṇava is the Vedantic formula for this school, and which essentially means the divine is incomprehensibly, utterly different from, and yet not at all different from, the world and sentient beings at one and the same time. 1 minute, okay, we can handle this. So basically, the divine is felt and experienced as immediately present and yet totally absent from the bhakta at the same time. And this is what drove Mahaprabhu, Caitanya, nuts. To the point where seeing a forest, he would be mistaken and say, this is Vrindavan. Seeing a hill, he would be thinking, this is Govardhan. Wherever he saw a river, there he would think, this is the Kalindi or the Yamuna. Absorbed in supreme love, Mahaprabhu would dance, and he would fall down weeping. He would dance because he felt gladdened by being in the presence of the divine, and he would fall down weeping because at the same time, he felt just he could not be possibly close enough to the divine. So both were going on. Conclusion, sensitivity leads to sustainability. That's my simple conclusion. How I got there, it's a little bit of non sequiturs going on, right? But just trust me on this, okay? I am not okay, I get 15 more seconds. Okay. A heightened and cultivated sensitivity, which is what bhakti is all about, leads to the greatest sustainability. A cultivation away from pride and egocentrism to an all too rare form of heliocentrism, that's my neologism, which means other-centric, other-person-centric. An ability to be sensitive to the thoughts and feelings of other beings, sevatvam. And even the Sanskrit language has a distinction between the active and middle voice, parasmaipada, totally absorbed in the object, as opposed to the middle voice, atmanepada. Even though it's transitive, it's concerned with oneself. So even the language of Sanskrit has this other focus. And finally, the great joy of love is to be found in the great joy experienced by the beloved. That relationship is without desire for one's own happiness. Where there is unconditional pure love, then this is its way and manner. Love of a person is in the other person's happiness, which is the only objective of one's love. And I'll simply say that maybe Mahaprabhu really wasn't that mistaken. Maybe every hill is Govardhan. Maybe every river is Yamuna. And maybe every forest is Vrindavan. And a bhakta loves nature in this way. Thank you very much. Yeah, I know.
So our next speaker is Hogan.
Could you go ahead? Yeah, you can say. All right. Thanks. All right, so first, as is customary, before I start, I want to give thanks to, I said there's 3 people who are responsible for my academic liberation. I'm thinking like academic moksha. And all of them are in the room today. 2 are Mira and AJ Shingal for providing the endowment to found this Center for Dharma Studies. And I'm so grateful and thankful to that because I was on a trajectory for mainstream Indology, and this is just a whole new thing that speaks to my interests and my field so much better. So thank you so much for that. And the others to Dr. Rita Sharmaji. I'm a product of her guidance, really. Whatever smart thing I say today, if I do, you can attribute that to the guidance and the tutelage that I've had and I've been privileged to have under Dr. Rita Sharma. A lot of these projects have come from her inspiration, and I just have to credit her for that and thank her dearly for that. So thank you. Okay, and then, so my project is looking at Caitanya Vaiṣṇavism. That's Gaudiya Vaishnavism, as we're talking about today, and Dr. Shoy just did a lovely presentation on. Looking at that tradition through the lens of ecofeminist theology. That is, ecofeminist theology is a hermeneutical system, okay? So I make that qualification because I'm not trying to awkwardly fit the Vaishnava tradition into a box where it doesn't quite fit. But what I'm showing is that ecofeminist philosophy is a way of reading, right? It's a broad rubric that allows for a specific reading, okay? So for me to unpack a little bit for maybe those of you who don't know what ecofeminism is ecofeminism proposes an intersectional relationship between multiple forms of oppression. That is to say, there's a mutually reinforcing relationship between misogyny, colonialism, racism, violence against animals, and violence against the natural world. We can look at ecofeminist thought as being both a hermeneutic of suspicion, but also providing a foundation for construction as well, too. So coming out of feminist thought, it's kind of easy to see how it could be a hermeneutic of suspicion. And we can look at some of the things that ecofeminist thought tends to critique are things like ontologies that posit a strong sense of self-other relationship, like we might see in modern individualism, hyper-individualism, and American ethos and such. And these kind of strongly stated up-down hierarchies, basically where you create a binary and you create a hierarchy between the binary and devalue one at the expense of other, and how those inherent functions in our language and thought, in modern thought, have led to patriarchy and oppression and destruction of the natural world. But also another main theme in ecofeminist thought is how construction of gender and notions of masculinity contribute to that as well too. And so a lot of this points to the unconscious factors that we see in language as well too. And I have to credit Marty Keel for pointing that out in her book, Nature Ethics. I'm leaning on her ecofeminist theology or philosophy for a lot of reasons. But that's a really important point that she made. So that's how we can see it as a hermeneutic of suspicion, looking for the sources of oppression, being in unconscious ways of thinking, metaphors, and language. But as a constructive mechanism, we can look at ecofeminist thought is seeking to create new paradigms, new metaphors, new ways that we can use language, new ways we can understand gender, and ways that valorize the feminine and the natural world as well too. So that's the basic frame, the lens. Now, how does that apply to the Caitanya Vaiṣṇava tradition is a question. It's an important question. To take up the last issue I was just mentioned in terms of gender, there's not a strong binary gender hierarchical relationship in the Caitanya tradition. As a matter of fact, notions of masculinity and femininity are not mutually exclusive and binary. We can see this in a number of different examples. We say that the Svarup Shakti, the internal essence of Bhagavan, of Sri Krishna, is actually multiplicity. It's made up of a variety of different types of Shakti, one of which is Kaladini Shakti, which Srimati Radharani, who Dr. Schweg showed some pictures of, is an emanation of, right? She's the expression of Kaladini Shakti, which is the Svarup. So this is a very complicated relationship when we talk about the internal essence of a masculine God is actually being a feminized, feminine spirit as well too. But also as devotees, a relationship to the divinity is considered to be one of masculinity and femininity where the devotee is feminine in relationship to the masculine as divinity. And then also Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who Dr. Schweg was citing, is also seen is the incarnation of Krishna in the Kali Yuga, but both simultaneously is being the incarnation of Krishna, but also Srimati Radharani at the same time in the same body, as evidenced by his golden hue, and that's why we call him Gauranga. So it's a very complicated, you can't really say there's a mutually exclusive binary hierarchical gender relationship in Chaitanya tradition that the hermeneutics of suspicion and feminist critique might levy. So in that way, it's very compatible. It's also compatible because eco-feminist thinkers often use this metaphor of a patchwork. That is to say, they don't propose that ecofeminism is like a monolithic system. Either you agree to all this or you're out. There's a variety of different methodologies that are encompassed under that, but there is some commonalities within ecofeminist thought that also exist within the Caitanya Vaiṣṇava tradition. Things like ontologies, I just talked about some things that have to do with gender relationships, but ontologies that involve part-to-whole relationships. There's epistemological assumptions that are very similar. I can't go into a lot of that, but we see within the ecofeminist sort of valorization of the subjective elements of epistemology, as opposed to is oftentimes stated as a refutation of the strictly objectivist scientism that we see in the epistemic dogmatism that characterizes the modern era. Also, ecofeminism tends to think of care ethics. Okay, now this is a very important point because a lot of times Professor G. Bill Moria yesterday spoke at length of the conflict between utilitarianism and deontology. And a lot of what ecofeminist thought tends to do is kind of subvert, kind of go around that that particular structure by actually proposing that there's an affect. The agency of affect is maybe more of an ethical force than the rational constructs of philosophy, is evidenced by what's more core to our being, what really impels us to act. And I've been involved in the animal rights movement for a long time. I always say I'm married to the animal rights movement because my wife is a full-time animal rights activist. And what we've seen in the environmental and animal rights movement is that no matter how compelling our arguments are, no matter how solid the science and statistics are, we find that people don't change. But then when we show them a picture of a cow that's going to be slaughtered, a week later we get an email that they went vegan. So drawing on that, the ethical agency of the emotional is a very strong theme and this has to do with, what did Dr. Schweig? Sensitivity leads to sustainability, right? And that is an impelling ethical force, as is proposed. And as Dr. Schweig showed, the Caitanya tradition is about increasing that sensitivity. Because as bhaktas, we're trying to intensify our loving relationships. That's our very soteriology, is to intensify that loving relationship. So I'm trying to bring Caitanya Vaishnavism into dialogue with the modern environmental movement. And that's an important thing because really with the scope and magnitude of our current environmental crisis, all aspects of human thought and endeavor need to be engaged with this. Every single religious tradition, art, philosophy, everything has to be. So really we all need to be, whatever our backgrounds are. So what I propose is if ecofeminist thought can be considered a hermeneutical lens, then I could say that Caitanya Vaishnavism is an instantiation of ecofeminist theology, right? Without having to contort anything about ecofeminist, just based on Caitanya Vaishnavism being presented in its own terms. It is inherently, I believe, completely compatible with being an instance of ecofeminist thought. Look at the clock. Okay. All right. So I can't unpack all of this points of comparison between ecofeminist thinkers in the Caitanya Vaishnava tradition, but there's one that I would like to lean on pretty heavily here, and this is the ontological similarities here. And once again, I gave a similar presentation to this about a year ago, actually, with Dr. Schweig, and I was doing a lot of the deontology utilitarianism perspective from an animal rights perspective and trying to look at ecology in a way that recognized the value of the individuality, of the individual, right? Marty Kuehl writes a lot in her book, Nature Ethics, actually most of her pretty colossal book, is about the refutation of what she sees as a collapse into holism that is a problem in environmental thought. And we can see this like Leopold's land ethic, for example, where systems become valued at the expense of the individual. And there's actually quite a bit of tension between animal rights activists and environmental movement. There's recently a documentary released called Cowspiracy, which kind of indicts the environmental movement for ignoring animal agriculture's contribution to global climate change, etc. But we also see this with the cozy relationship between some environmental organizations and hunting and fishing organizations, and when species are considered to be invasive and therefore are eradicated, right? This is inimical to cultivating an ethic of care. I mean, talk about intrinsic worth. I mean, that's transitive value. Being is only valuable insofar as they either contribute or detract to the system. And the second they don't, get rid of them, they're invasive, okay? So this is ecological management. Who was it that said that? That's what that is, right? This is not fostering an intrinsic feeling of care. This is not following Dr. Schweig's sensitivity is sustainability dictate. So this is a Chintya Veda Veda Tattva, this part of the whole relationship, that creates an equal valuation of part to whole. It's not a hierarchical valuation of part to whole, whereby the whole is considered to be more important or more ultimate than the provisional part, right? But they're equally valued, thereby deconstructing and obliterating any sort of hierarchical binary between them. And that is exactly a Chintya Veda Veda Tattva. And this is what is instantiated with Marty Keel's quote. I will say, she says, ecofeminist thought is, quote, an invitation to dissolve the dualistic thinking that separates reason from emotion, the conscious from the unconscious, the domestic from the wild, and animal advocacy from nature ethics. It welcomes the larger scientific stories of evolutionary and ecological processes, i.e. holism, but never loses sight of the individual beings who exist within the larger narratives. Okay, now, is Dr. Schweg really nicely laid out for me, that has an implication in our emotional cultivation of sensitivity. The word bhakti actually comes from the root bhaj, separate, right? Separation and individuality is essential, according to the Caitanya tradition, to cultivate loving relationships. You must have the dynamic between lover and beloved, between sambhoga, of coming together with your beloved, but also vipralamba, the separation, the intense paradox that creates, that Dr. Schweig so insightfully pointed out. The Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was constantly completely immersed with God as revelation. God is completely absent, and felt that him. We said very strongly in Shikshastakam, right? And the emotional implication that the realization, the valuation, the equivalent valuation of part to whole, how that mandates that. So Dr. Keel acknowledges this in her ecofeminist thought, and she cites Marilyn Frye to that regard. Quote, one who sees with a loving eye is separate from the other whom she sees. There are boundaries between them. She and the other are two. Their interests are not identical. They are not blended in vital parasitic or symbiotic relationships, nor does she believe they are or try to pretend they be. So we see an example of how the ontology of separation is both systems considered to be essential to the cultivation of a loving ethic of care. All right, thank you very much.